Robot JOX is a 1990 American post-apocalyptic mega science fiction film directed by Stuart Gordon and starring Gary Graham, Anna Marie Johnson, and Paul Koslow. Co-written by science fiction author Joe Haldeman, the film's plot follows Achilles, one of the robot jocks who pilot giant machines that fight international battles to settle territorial disputes in a dystopian post-apocalyptic world.
What's going on, guys? So today we're doing a bit of a different podcast slash movie review. As you heard in the intro, we're going over one of my favorite movies of all time from my childhood slash teen years slash early 20s, because I watched it forever. And it's a little movie, literally, I guess, kind of, called Robot JOX. And it should be an interesting review, or it'll be terrible, one way or the other. But with me today, I have Gary Busey's favorite Make-A-Wish child, otherwise known as Dante.
Hey, what's up, y'all? Hey, just so you know, if something horrible happens to my kid and she needs to go on the Make-A-Wish list, that is going to be her wish.
Yeah, it's going to be
Gary
her
Busey.
wish. Her wish. Yeah. I want my daddy to be able to hang out with Gary Busey all day.
He was like, don't say your daddy, just say you want to hang out with Gary Busey.
Just you. You want to hang out with Gary Busey.
Say you want Gary Busey to bring some Coke.
You coked out Gary Busey. There you go. When you said that shit on the podcast, I laughed my ass off. I had to stop for a minute. That was fucking funny. So, guys, if you're unfamiliar with Dante, he's been on one of the podcasts before. He's been over on the Now You Made It Awkward podcast, which this is technically not. This is a Shoky Movie review podcast instead. But he is the host of many podcasts, such as the So You Like Horror podcast, the Off the Mats podcast. I'm getting a little bit of cottonmouth from this IPA. And then also the, why does my brain just go dry? Columpton Beer Club, possibly being renamed soon, the podcast as well. So links will be in the description down below if you want to go give them a listen. Because they have a lot of fun on any of those channels. But tonight, with the movie review we're going to be doing, I'm stealing his format. Instead of me sitting and talking to the camera the whole time, like I normally would do, I'm going to sit here and talk to the camera, but Dante's here too.
Yeah, so I'm glad to be your guest. Glad to be company.
I mean, maybe. I don't need, because I have not heard your thoughts on this movie yet, so we'll see. So because I know he does the podcast, or not, the movie podcast, I said, hey, come review this movie with me. And he's like, okay. And then we not talked a whole lot since, so it's at least not about it.
I said okay before you told me the movie, and as soon as it was like, fuck. Exactly.
It's like you agreed to it, and then you got the movie choice. But we'll see how bad or good it is. So the way this will work, we're going to talk about the movie in general, but then we'll also talk about our good, our bad, and our ugly. These are different opinions of the movie. And then we'll give an overall out of 10 score at the end, give or take. But for the most part, my history with this movie, I watched it with one of my best friends growing up. His name was Brian. I don't even know where he saw it, but I know he rented it or something and called me over. My best friend lived across the street, and we watched it. And I was like, holy shit. It was like, and I don't even know, probably maybe 10 years old if I had to guess, because this movie came out in 1990. It would have been on VHS probably sometime around 92, however long delay takes for getting the movie released. Apparently just getting this movie out in general was difficult, reading the history of it. And I know after that, I ended up buying it on VHS many years later at Walmart, and then eventually on DVD. And then the crazy thing is the rights have flip-flopped so much for years. Since 2015, there is now a Blu-ray put out by Shout Factory. So, nice. Shout out to Shout Factory for buying up crap nobody wants and putting it out on Blu-ray. So that's pretty awesome. It's a couple little fun trivia notes about the movie as we go here. Near the beginning of the movie, there's a terrible, terrible accident where a giant robot falls on a crowd of spectators. The screams of the spectators were actually used in a Nine Inch Nails song called "The Becoming." So they actually
Nice.
they took the screams from the movie, sampled it, and put it into that song. So that's interesting in and of itself.
One of my favorite parts of the movie, actually.
Yeah, you just love it when all the people die. It's like,
Yeah. I mean, you know,
yeah.
I got a rough shout out from Detroit.
I mean, yeah. Oh yeah, this movie should have definitely reminded you of growing up in Detroit. Actually, I don't even know where this movie technically takes place. They never tell you. Like,
I was trying to find it.
They never say where it technically is, but I know where it was filmed, at least for the outside shots. But like otherwise, it was. I'm gonna assume somewhere West Coast because it kind of makes sense. The first one seems like it takes place in like Siberia or something because you see the tail end. It opens on the tail end of a battle. Which one thing I did find out was that little scene with the miniatures and the painting through the forest right at the beginning. That was actually created by the guy to sell the movie in the first place. So like all that miniature work and all that stuff was the kind of proof of concept, and then they just added to it to make it the intro to the movie. So basically, if you missed the intro of this, basically instead of having big old wars in the future, we now settle disputes, territorial disputes or whatever, with single combat of giant robots. As people on this channel love giant mecha things such as Gundam, well, they're already on board with giant robots fighting each other with humans in the middle of it. And the funny thing is, it was actually more inspired by Transformers than it was by Gundam, even though it was out at the same time. So the guy who created it, he's like, I like the big robots fighting. So he just, that's how we got here. And I think that's also why there's some.
That was the accent that he said it in.
I hope so too. I like the big robots fighting. And let's see, more trivia on this. There was an actual sequel considered, and the main creative team and the main star would have come back to do it, but they of course canceled it. But it would have been a continuation, which given early 90s movies, when you have some type of sci-fi thing, when you have two enemies come, usually you'll have a sequel where they come together in the sequel to fight something else. So in this case would have been Aliens, which actually kind of sets things up because Gary Graham ended up being the star of Alien Nation for a very long time on Fox. So
I was looking at him and I was like, what the fuck do I know him
You
from?
knew his face.
This fucking guy.
All the sci-fi.
I could not figure it out. And then as soon as you say Alien Nation, I was like, there it is.
Yep.
I fucking knew it.
So he did Alien Nation for, I think, like 4 or 5 seasons, however long that shit was on. Because that was how I knew him. So when Alien Nation came on, I was like, it's Achilles. And then let's see here. There was a big battle at one point while they were making it between the two different guys, Joe Haldeman and Stuart Gordon. Because one guy literally is like, okay, what did he say? He said, Joe, our problem is that you're writing a movie for adults that children can enjoy, but I'm directing a movie for children that adults can enjoy. So, like, while they're making the movie, they also didn't know which way they were swinging it. And I think realistically, it's either. Like, because I was a kid when I watched it,
So when Sarah and I watched it, my wife and I, and she saw the rating, she was like, PG.
Mm-hmm.
The fuck? Like, what are we about to watch?
90s PG.
I was like, I don't know.
It's 90s PG.
Yeah. That's the thing. Anything from the 80s and 90s, if it said PG-13, is definitely an R.
R
If it said PG, it's a PG-13, maybe a low grade R, but it's definitely not. Sophie's probably not going to be sitting in on this one. Maybe.
I mean, violence, nudity, and death. I mean, like. It wasn't. It wasn't. You had some ass, decent ass too.
No shit.
Yeah, definitely none of that. But I do think that it was funny. Oh, by the way, if you watch the version on Tubi, that's not the initial version that came out on VHS because there was an edited version that came out initially. So when I watched this, it was the first time that I saw the blood on the wall after the one person-on-person killing that happened. Because in the original version that I saw and that I was very familiar with, when the gunshot goes off, it cuts to the footage of the mech being shot and falling down. So they use it like symbology in a way. So I never saw that scene where he actually gets shot in the head and the blood splatters on the wall. And then there was another scene, another very minor scene that was added. Oh, it was the when the robot falls on the crowd, it actually lingers on the crowd, and then the news report shows the guy like burnt and screaming. That was not in the original. They actually cut that down a little bit. It just cut to the next little bit right after that. It cut out like about 3 or 4 seconds of lingering on people injured.
Shout out to Tubi, son.
Yeah,
Gotta love it.
So the DVD version actually is where that came from, but it was apparently like the Japanese release, I believe, was the one that had all the extra stuff. The American
I fucking
release
knew
didn't.
it.
Yeah, of course. But it's just funny that I saw an edited version but never knew it. Isn't that funny? I grew up on the edited version and never realized it. Stuart Gordon also almost cast Jean-Claude Van Damme as Achilles, which would have been a very different movie and would have costed a lot more.
Oh yeah,
Especially at that time when he was like really on the rise. Oh yeah, that would have been ridiculous.
yeah. I think, especially for 1990, yeah, he was up and coming, but it was still, it was. Okay. So let me take a step back. Because this goes into a critique I have later on about something, but I think the fight scenes would have been a lot different with Jean-Claude Van Damme.
True, but I also think that he would have been throwing like roundhouse kicks or something, and it would have been like, how do we make the robot do that?
Yeah, I think it would have been too much for what that movie was ready for, or the capabilities, especially like I said with the robots. It's like, yeah, we can't do that.
Even though there is a big old kick in part of it, which the pilot technically didn't do, but so in the movie the mechs are piloted by, actually in a way we only just developed this technology now with that omnidirectional VR stuff. So it locks you in at the hips and then your feet slide on the pad to walk. I was like, they came up with that shit in 1989 when they shot this. It's like actually earlier than that. It was on delay for 2 years. But that's crazy. They came up with that idea then and only have just implemented it now in like 2022, 2023 into our own thing. And it's funny that it's the same kind of tech. They had the hand controls, which all booted in, and then like put the visor down. It looks like a fucking VR set,
I'm willing to bet that whoever kind of really grasped the technology for now and put it out there probably watched this. They're probably offended us already, and they're sitting around kind of brainstorming, like, how the fuck do we make this work? And this dude was like, dude, just hear me out.
I mean,
go back and watch this movie.
Exactly. It was just smooth metal, because like the boots have smooth metal on it, and then the floor is slightly curved and it's polished metal, so it literally just slides. But like it's just funny. Like the budget of this movie was kind of small, even for the day. It was about $6.5 million. It was rumored to be up to 10, but the actual guy said it's like, no, we did it at 6.5. So like they made this movie in 1988, give or take, for only $6.5 million, which is kind of impressive given the sheer amount of miniatures and stop motion and all that, because that's where so much of the budget went to. Because the special effects are cheesy, but the practical ones look awesome.
Yeah, that's one of the higher notes that I have here.
Yeah,
is the practical effects.
Yeah, and I mean, like, and it wasn't even like any of the big name studios. It wasn't like Phil Tippett or anybody like that doing it. The horror gods who did all the stop motion stuff back then. It wasn't even those guys. It was like small stuff. In fact, like Empire Pictures, this movie cost so much that they went bankrupt, and then Epic Productions had to buy the movie and finish it 2 years later. That's crazy. And like apparently most of the thing was filmed in Rome, because that's where you think to go when you film stuff, is Rome. And I was like, but there's no outside scenes. I was like, what did they film in Rome? Did they just, that's where the studio was, I guess? I don't know. But then the outside stuff for the robots was filmed in, like, I think they said the Sonoma Desert in California.
It could have been that they filmed it in Rome because maybe certain restrictions here, zoning restrictions, perhaps. I'm not sure of what.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it would just make sense. It's like, look, we got to film it over here because we're not allowed to do this, or I don't know. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. And even with that, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, like, my only guess is that's where the studio was. Like, that's the only thing I can think of. Because Empire Studios, clearly, they were done after this. So I guess that's where they were filming it. And I mean, so much of it is either on a set or indoors. So, I mean, there's almost no outdoor shots at all. I think even the stuff at the end where they're fighting on foot, I think is straight up in a soundstage. It looks like painted backgrounds and shit.
So, real quick, because I was thinking about it as we're watching it, and I didn't get the chance to check it out later. When is this supposed to take place?
I think it's supposed to take place around about the 2040s.
Okay, so we
Because
still got time.
yeah, so I think that because something that was not necessarily mentioned in there is like it's post-nuclear war. So there was a nuclear war that basically fucked the planet up, and that's one reason why it divided the way it did. So realistically, the world is now set either in the market, which is, well, essentially capitalism countries, and then the Confederation, which is all the communist countries. And you can see this represented very well when you see the different sides. Like, you see American, Japanese, European people kind of together, but then you see clearly like Russians and Chinese and other people like that on the opposite side. Mostly Russians, if we're honest. Russians and probably some Eastern Europeans, if we're going to be honest there. But it was interesting that, like, in my mind, I like the idea of settling things on 1v1 kind of, instead of having these gigantic wars, because they learned the value of life back then. It's like, look, this is how far we pushed it, and like, we fucked the world and we've killed millions of people. God knows how many people died. They didn't go to the history that far, other than the opening narration, and it just said wars are no longer fought. They didn't say, oh, by the way, it was a giant nuclear war that wasted the planet, and that's why it's, half wasteland at this point. They don't cover that part. They just say, oh, yeah, we're not warring anymore. We're just having two dudes spar in giant robots. Why giant robots? I don't know. I assume at some point they started leveling up. Like, I think it started out like some of these Megabots. Have you ever seen the Megabot battles? I assume it started out that way, and then got there. And those guys 100% saw this movie when they were kids. Like, there's no way, because you see the mechs they designed. I'm like, I see exactly where you got the idea for this shit.
Well, I've always felt like, even like as a kid, shit like that, should have just became the future of combat. But then even watching this, was like, well, why do we got to go robots? Why don't we just do, straight MMA? Just get your motherfuckers from here. But then again,
it's cool. That's why we have all these weapons.
Well, no. No, I'm saying no. That was fucking cool. But I'm saying, like, if we did that, like, for real, like, no, let's just go, throw some motherfuckers in the cage. But I think, though we do have some, really fucking good fighters here in the U.S., I think Dagestan and those, former USSR countries would just fucking dominate.
Yeah,
they're out there fucking playing with bears as like kids.
Yeah, I think realistically, this this had to have been after Rocky 1, right? Rocky 1 was in the 70s? Yeah. So it definitely feels like a Rocky movie to a degree, but with less training arc. Like, there's no training arc.
No montage.
There's not even a montage, which would have been fun, realistically. I think if this movie was about 25 minutes longer, slightly tweak the script, you could have had that montage. The comeback montage. No, this movie's got no time for montages. That's the only thing about it. Is like, no, this movie's getting the fuck done, because I think it was only like 82 minutes or something.
Yeah, it wasn't. When I looked at the time, I think it was like, about under 90.
Yeah,
sure. But with his comeback, I was expecting the montage.
Yeah, which they didn't. They didn't have time for montages. They did have time for remote control floating cars. So I was like, this movie also kind of predicted, or at least showed, a lot of shit that we have nowadays as it goes. They still had phones that were like wired, though, because they couldn't quite figure out wireless phones just yet, even though cordless phones definitely existed then in 1980s. So, I mean, It is dated by the technology, but it's also, to me, is made more fun for that reason. Like, it doesn't look like a movie set in 2065. You know, it definitely looks like a 1980s version of 2065, but also not super, at least to me, not super cheesy, because I feel like they did try kind of hard in certain places. But you can't get around CRT TVs. You just there's no getting around how bad those look on screen, you know.
So there were, when you look at the movie as a whole, for stuff that came out during that time, especially even like bigger commercial things that came out, this definitely had more of a serious take. Even though when you look at it now, looking back on it, it's like, oh my god, that's so like campy and goofy.
Lots of camp.
To based on our later standards. But if you look at it back then, this was actually a lot more serious than some of the other shit that was coming out around that time.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that was based off of the shit that we would see with Godzilla films, from previous days. So it always felt like, oh, it has to be campy, it has to be silly. Whereas this came out, it was like, look, we got to make this a little bit more serious and give like a legit threat by having that social commentary in there of Russia versus the US.
Yeah. Also, there's an incidental pun with this movie given where we watched it. Because the JOX, as they call them, the actual people call them tubies.
Damn tubies.
Because they're test tube babies. But it's actually not just that, because it never occurred to me until like later. So they're called tubies because yes, they're genetically engineered humans to be the best fighters they can be, the next generation of robot jocks. However, also tubies because they're next to be robot jocks. So it's actually a double entendre there without meaning to. It's like, because it kind of makes sense because they keep calling them tubies, but then like the context of how they say it sometimes changes the meaning of it. But like, so Achilles is basically one of the last natural born fighters. And so basically they go 10 fights. So 10 contracted fights. God knows how much money you get paid for this. Apparently a lot, because you see the differences where he lives as a paid fighter and where his family lives as just normal people. And it doesn't even look like slums. It just looks like there's no fucking money for anybody. It's their version of the projects in 2065. Like, especially when he goes into that building.
That was something I point out to Sarah, because I was just at this point of the movie, I was kind of like fucked up on NyQuil, and was like, yo, what the fuck? Like, look at this dude's bedroom, yo. He's sleeping in the kid's room. And Sarah's like, he might be in the living room.
Yeah,
like,
there might have been a couch
up in the house together.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, my bad.
And they got like, I think they're working on kid number 6 or something, because and I love the concept. She said, I'm doing my part. And like it's subtle commentary on the fact that there's so many people killed that we need a population boom for the future. So they're literally trying to have as many kids as possible. And in my brain earlier today, I'm like, what if this is in the future of Children of Men? Like, this is only like maybe 10 years out from Children of Men. Like, so, that was a pretty decent movie. I saw that out of nowhere. And that movie does fuck with my brain a little bit. Go ahead. Well, I was going to say, because it talks also to the preciousness of life currently, because Alexander, being the dickhead that he is, not only defeats his opponent, but has killed 9 of them in a row. So he's killed 9 of the best market version of just call it the U.S. Let's just call it what it is. The U.S. version of the fighters. He just keeps killing them instead of fucking. Even though, like at the beginning of this, the dude literally, his back is broken. He can't even get out of the fucking mech, and he says, "I yield." And he's like, "I win. Fuck it," and he just crushes him to death. And I'm like, "What a dick." And I'm like, I also kind of want to see what that robot looked like when it was still upright, because it looks so ridiculous on the ground. It looks like a crashed airplane. I was like, what did that actually look like? Because I'm interested now. And I didn't put it in the notes, but one of the things I did enjoy about this movie was the mech design. I was like, because like it generally makes sense. It's both futuristic but simplistic at the same time. Like, because like there's not too much going on. It's like, because at some point they figured out, they're like, okay, we can only do so much with this bipedal frame we've got. So if we overload it, make it too top heavy, then we're gonna fuck with it, and then we gotta make this thing work. Which, by the way, giant bipedal robots is such a stupid idea. It's so difficult. It's like because that's one reason why they can't make a working Gundam, because they're all bipedal. Even the one that's working is on a frame that holds it up as it walks. You know, it's like, but you can see, in the earlier designs they were on tracks like tanks. They had arms for weapons, but they were on tracks. They only really started going to bipedal stuff later. So, we see the evolution.
Yeah, that's something we see even now. Well, not just now, but like when you look at sports, like growing up watching basketball, as an example, you have someone like Manute Bol or George Mirasan or Sean Bradley. These guys are over 7 feet tall and they're like skinny.
Yeah.
And they're not the most athletic of giant guys. I mean, that's why when Shaq came along, it was like, holy shit, what is this thing moving like this? And now kids today that are like 7 feet tall moving like point guards.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like the ideal of like a bipedal like robot that big. It's like humans in general don't really have good balance. We think we have good balance because we move around.
Yeah.
But my teammate pointed that out when he was a bouncer. He had to break up a fight and he grabbed a guy and the guy just fell to the ground. He was like, oh shit, I forgot normal people don't have good balance because we're all martial artists. So we are always working on that shit.
Flex.
So like then you translate that. Somebody brag. But like
all those normies be falling down all the time.
You motherfuckers be tripping.
Literally.
But like you transport this all to like, now the ideal of a robot.
Yeah.
You just take away the intricate parts of like how a human, can position their legs, just stand a certain way. These motherfucking robots are just standing like, square footed and like just one push knocks them over.
Yeah. And actually we do see them fall down a few times. And then they somehow get back up. Don't even ask how they technically have the ability to get back up. Don't even want to think about the servos necessary, but it's still fun. But I like that at least in one case, the way he gets up makes sense. Then another time it's just like, how the fuck did he get up off the ground? He should be turtling. He's like, and I'm sure at some point they created one that was like that and fell over, and that's when it's like the evolution of watching BattleBots or Robot Wars. Robot Wars. Which, by the way, there is a not sequel version of this movie called Robot Wars. In some places, it's called Robot JOX 2. It is not a sequel. It's just very similar, and the animatronic, or not the animatronics, but the miniature work and stuff like that is very similar. There's only 2 robots in it, technically speaking, and the battle is really bad. It's not worth watching. Please don't watch it. And then there's another one that's actually before that looks like it's connected. It's not. Which is all 3 of these movies not connected, but the world at large connects them because of their similarities.
Well, like it's like got the same producer for all 3.
Yeah. But it's
but
it's not even connected. It's like it's so loosely connected just by the fact it's giant robots. But the idea of quote unquote Robot Wars, where they've abandoned that concept and robots that are left over are used for, like in one case, a giant scorpion thing is basically just a bus to get across the desert because trains don't exist, I guess. And then that battle is so bad in that movie. Please don't watch it. It's so fucking bad.
I feel like I need to.
Okay,
at
go
least YouTube it.
I guess if you can find it on Tubi or YouTube, maybe watch it, but don't watch it with the expectation that it's actually connected to this movie, because it really doesn't make any sense, especially when they find the old robot in a silo in the desert, and they're like, okay, but why would this be just out here? You could see how it could be in the same universe, but it also doesn't make sense. In this case, those robots are made for war, not for just single combat. And I like how we skipped over just using giant robots to fight in wars. We went from normal war to giant robot battles. I'm sure there's somewhere in between where it was, like I said, it was minor mech suit battles. And they're like, these aren't big enough, It would make sense that they repurposed the weapons of war, but I don't even think that's what they were going for, Or at least that's not what it's alluded to in any shape, Go ahead.
Oh, no. Whatever I was going to say was going to be nonsense. I'm not sure what the fuck I'm saying half the time. I'm on Benadryl and wine right now.
Yeah. It's like lean, but not really.
It's just fall.
Yeah. Topical. But either way, I like the characters in the movie, and I really dig the banter, like especially at the beginning, like when it's Achilles and Tex, like post battle, and they're looking at the tubies, and like I always remember the when the doctor comes in and asks them for a specimen, a sample.
I'd appreciate it if you would
And
provide
they're
us
like,
with raw
"Wait, you
material.
want what?" It's like, "Well, we need
raw
some,
material.
it would be great if we got the two greatest
The
living
gene
jocks
pool.
alive to get their DNA into
You
the
are
gene
the
pool."
market's most
And
famous
they're
jocks.
like,
Think.
what Achilles says, can we cut out the
Can we
middleman
just
and
skip the
or skip the middleman and go
make it
to direct deposit? Looking over at Athena, the only kind of female character realistically in the movie, or at least the only character that does anything. I think there's technically three females. It's Athena, the doctor, and then his sister-in-law. Everyone else is dudes, which is fine. And she's the only female robot jock. Yeah, it's like JOX is with an X, by the way. That's the because that's how you make it cool. You put the X in there. It's as though Elon wrote this one. Which, I mean, if he wants to make giant robots that we can fight in, I'm on board.
I trust his ability to design something that can actually not just tip over.
Yeah, it won't fall over. Well, it might fall over, but in theory, it shouldn't. But once he gets to Mars, I think he's waiting to get to Mars, then giant robots.
Love it.
Yeah, send the giant robots to Mars, which will be also fun. I just think we're now set that we can have total recall eventually. We'll get there.
That's
once we're on
that's
Mars.
what all of this is all about anyways, just trying to like get us closer to the movies that we grew up on.
Yeah. I mean, as long as we skip any of the craziness that we do on the moon. I mean, we know there's at least 2 moon bases, but we're just not going there, because they're always on the dark side of the moon. So we never see those hidden Russian and Chinese bases on the moon.
I mean, unless you have somebody from QAnon,
I mean,
space is fake.
I had that discussion with somebody not long ago. Yeah, I had last week. I had the discussion about the moon landing being faked. And like he just wouldn't take anything for it. It's like, how did they film the first steps on the moon? I was like, they have an explanation for that, literally. And it was like, oh yeah, sure, they just had a camera. I was like, yeah, they had a camera.
Yeah, that's how that works.
Yeah, he literally had the camera, and they just went thoop, speared it into the surface, and then stepped down the fucking ladder. It is what it, and it was controlled from inside the machine. But it is what it is. It was fun. It was fun, even though dumb.
Damn tubies.
But like, see, this is one of those movies where it's like either I have to do a full on breakdown or just get into the good, because I feel like the breakdown basically happens with the good, the bad, and the ugly, because I feel like that's the way the movie goes. It's like it goes from good to the bad to the ugly as the movie progresses, realistically. So actually, just for time's sake, let's just do that then, because like we'll talk about it as we go. And as the guest, I will let you go first with your goods.
Okay. All right. So, for my good, one of the big things was the social commentary.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like for the time they did a good job. And I think for its time, though, too, it was very cut and dry. Whereas these days, they try to be ambiguous about things and try to give it this double meaning. They were just very straightforward about it. We are in a distant future where we're kind of in a somewhat dystopian world, not completely dystopian, but, teetering on that border.
Yeah.
And, it's still kind of the Cold War shit,
Yeah.
Russia versus America, without saying those specific words. So I did actually like that a lot. And the concept in itself, I just really enjoyed it. The ideal of like, look, we're not fighting wars anymore. We're just gonna we're not gonna use armies. We're just gonna use these robots.
Yep.
And conceivably, it should be another ideal that like no one's gonna be killed. No one, no one's getting hurt.
Yeah.
Should be.
Yeah.
It doesn't.
But
work
then
out
Alexander. But then Alexander happens.
Yeah, they're like, okay, this is the rule. This is what we're gonna do. And Alexander's like, if he dies, he dies.
Yes.
And there we are. But I did like that concept. It felt, especially for its time, relatively original.
Mm-hmm.
Just considering the world we're in. And then the practical effects I thought were fun.
Yeah.
This is a film made in the 80s, though it came out in the 90s. So by, that metric, it is an 80s film. And the special effects had been tainted by the 90s run of special effects that we discussed in the horror episode, how The special effects, though it was advanced in the 90s, it actually was kind of it actually hurt films.
Step too far.
Yes. So I
It's
like
that
the
in
practical
between.
effects
It
in
was
this.
that in between where they're getting away from practical, and then like they slip a little too far into the CG without it being
Yeah.
refined, and then now and then of course you get into the 2000s where more CG a little way too far. It's like
It's way
the 90s was one step too far. There's still a lot of practical, but not like the 80s. Nowhere near
yeah.
like that. Because even the green screening, like some of the green screen work in this movie is actually pretty top notch, and some of it is like really
Mhm.
bad rear projecting. Like you can't get away from some of those scenes, but then some of it is like top notch. Like that's the hard part. And for a movie that was this quote unquote affordable, I don't want to call it cheap because it's still 6.5 million, but like in today's money, that's bullshit movies. You know,
Yeah.
Rubber was what 800,000 to make Rubber. Was that? Yeah. So think about that. Think about the budget of how good that movie looks in 2010 for 800,000 versus 6.5 million in '88. That's crazy difference.
I feel like also with all the red tape with this movie and all like the chaos,
Yeah.
that does play a little bit into it, even though, just looking at the times, it is what it is.
Yeah.
Whereas Rubber was kind of like, look,
Yeah.
I'm doing this.
This
This is what's coming out, and it's
and,
linear.
and that was a independent movie versus this was not. This was meant to be like a big budget blockbuster, and it was a flop. It's only ever made or back then it only made like a 1.5 million. Like it didn't even get back half its fucking budget in any way. I was like, did it just come out of the shitty time? Like what was going on in 1990? I mean, like
1990 was a big
it's a
year
big
though for
movie.
films.
Yeah, I mean, and I didn't pay attention to what month it dropped. I would assume like middle of the summer.
November.
Oh, this was a November movie? Holy shit. Like, November and December is either blockbuster or where movies go to die. But it was also delayed so much that maybe it was supposed to be a summer blockbuster. And instead of waiting
Yeah,
another year, you know.
I think with it dropping when it dropped and being delayed so much, it's one of those movies where it was kind of like, look, just put it out. We're not like, let's just go.
Yeah.
Whereas like you see that a lot with movies now, where there are movies you'll see a trailer for it years ago, and then when it finally drops out, you forget that it was ever even
ever
a
a
thing.
thing.
They just forced it out.
Yeah.
And
Like,
didn't market it.
exactly. Like, and I'm sure this had marketing because, like, you can watch the actual ads are pretty bomb. If you actually watch the trailer for it, it's got the new in a world, that kind of shit.
It's a new age of combat.
Human beings, genetically engineered to be the best fighters in history.
Two champions
It isn't over until someone wins.
at war with each other.
Kill it! I have already killed you.
Two invincible men.
Let's finish it, Alexander, here now.
The ultimate killing machines.
I'm gonna get in this thing, and I'm gonna kick your... The battle's over.
Not for me.
Robot JOX.
It's like it was definitely an action movie, but who the hell sells an action movie in November? Like that's just nuts. Like that clearly had to have been a get it out because we're late and we don't want to wait another 6 months. Like this should have been like an April movie or a May movie.
Yeah. If this dropped in kind of that going into that summer blockbuster period, one of two things happens. It blends in and gets forgotten, or because especially the themes to it, I think it could have stood out, but I feel like it was just put this movie out. We just got to get it out because we don't want to wait any longer. So, it is what it is, though.
Because
Unfortunately.
1990 was also when the original Ninja Turtles movie dropped, and that
Yes.
dropped in March. and that had a ridiculous return for what it was.
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that this movie, if it had come out earlier in the year, probably would have hit harder. But coming off of '89 Batman, which was massive, '89 and '90, there was like a changing of movies. It was the dark gritty area of like that. It's like we're coming out of the weird like Technicolor '70s, like the trippy shit of the '70s, and then like the mid '80s like teen movies, and then I think we're like getting into like the dark gritty shit, and it's like we're getting ready to go into the darkness of the '90s.
Yeah, I think also again with this movie being made in the '80s and then it drops in the '90s, film just was different. Filmmaking was different. They were talking about there's something I saw a while back talking about '70s transition into '80s.
Yeah.
The first movie in the '80s that looked like it wasn't from the '70s was Ordinary People.
Oh, wow.
And then that transition kind of took over, and you kind of have a similar thing that happens here with the '80s to the '90s.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this movie it's stuck in the '80s. Had this movie come out in '89 or '88, I think it would have done.
If it had come out when initially intended, because there was a 2-year delay. So I mean, it was already, they had delays in the production due to weather and shit like that, and then money. But then the fact that it was in production and then the studio failed, so it's like, whoop, what do you do? At least we got it. I mean, like, it may have been a flop, but of course it's a cult classic at this point because more people saw it after the fact. But they can't make money. It's like you can't make money now off of it. The VHS sales. What?
I mentioned this at work the other day, and surprisingly, my coworker, she smiled and goes, "Oh wow, like you're gonna watch that?"
Yeah.
And I looked at her, I was like, "What the fuck?"
Somebody else who knew what the movie was.
And then she's young, like she's I would say she's like maybe early to mid 20s.
No shit.
So I was like, huh.
It had a resurgence due to Pacific Rim.
So that makes sense.
Pacific Rim, people went other big robot movies, and then all the kids like me went, we got to watch Robot Jocks because Pacific Rim came out, and Pacific Rim was great. Like that is a fantastic movie. Now the sequel, but the original one was for me another cult classic in that same, because there's not that many giant mecha movies. Like period. We got giant monsters all over the place. Hell, we got at least two new Godzilla properties coming, both from Toho and Legendary, so it's like even Godzilla is continuing his resurgence in the modern day. But when you're talking about a minute ago, the overlapping of decades, because when you guys did the 2000s horror stuff, Sarah often brought up movies from the late 90s that rolled into the 2000s because that late 90 to like 2002, 98 to 2002, it's just all the same shit because you could have made that movie 2 years ago and it takes that long. Remember when movies seemed like they took forever to come out? Now it seems like we hear about it last second and we assume it took 6 months, Yeah.
Well, and that was one acknowledgement, just kind of with movies in the 2000s, that transition for movies to feel like they belonged in the 2000s, they didn't belong with the 90s, was around 2003, 2004.
Yeah.
And then, now going from the 2000s to the teens, there's not, it all kind of blends in. So it's a little harder to pinpoint it. So,
it doesn't
kind of going back to this one.
Yeah, and it also doesn't feel like a giant shift from like other decades. That feels like there's major shifts. From the 2000s to the 2010s does not feel like a major shift until you get to like 2017. It's like it feels like it's all like 2006 for a really long time for me personally.
Also, too, with a lot of these shows through the decade, technologies change massively.
Yeah.
So, you'd have something like, silent films. Now you got talking in your films. Now you got black and white with your films. Now you're going to color with your films. Now you're going to blood in your films. Now you're going to, just different thematic changes that makes it feel like, okay, this is this decade.
Yeah.
Whereas once you get into those 2000s, you don't have that so much until around like 2016, 2017, where the themes change, not so much the actual filmmaking itself.
Yeah. The ideas shift, but the actual filmmaking doesn't. It's like things get cleaner, but it's basically the same shit. It's like it looks like the same decade, even though it's a course of almost 20 years. Maybe the 2020s we're on the downhill curve. We're on the opposite side of the uncanny valley now. Like we were in the good zone. Now we're in the weird zone of like, why is CG ass again? I was like, can we just like wrap back around? And we are with the practical effects like we were talking about. And in fact, that's my goods were the use of miniatures, like the miniature sets, all beautiful. Like the outdoor stuff, and then the stop motion actually was really well done. Like it doesn't look super stuttery. It's pretty smooth, and considering like they're moving, like I don't think they were clay. I think they were like legit just models or whatever.
Yes.
And like you can find some of the behind the scenes stuff, and it's like this isn't like ILM doing this stuff. You know, it's a smaller studio, but the fact that they've mastered stop motion photography and miniatures to this degree, but even puppetry, because you get the moment where like the thing is climbing out of the hole, and like that's not stop motion, that's like a dude like moving the thing around. But also I love the idea that, you know, in Japan we've already done guys in suits for things. No guys in suits for this. No dude dressed as a giant robot. It's like if you're seeing a robot, it's either a miniature or a thing, or like a bigature, you know, or almost 1-to-1. I'll get to that here in a little bit. But also I like the idea that, you know, you kind of mentioned with the social commentary, but I also like the world building of it, because they didn't tell us we had like nuclear war that basically roasted the world, but we saw pollution everywhere. We saw people are basically living in poverty,
And
the mask wearing, because outside the air is so bad, and you can see it's like cruddy, it's shitty looking outside. Everyone lives indoors. Nobody has windows on things, you know. Not everybody has cars. People get around. Like Achilles has a vehicle, and like that seems so foreign compared to everyone else we see in this movie, you know. And then like the poor basically live off of what they can get. I mean, food is scarce. They had a hot dog and called it, "Look, we're having meat tonight," which was crazy. And I
She
do
didn't even cut that hot dog up. She just dropped the hot dog in there.
Literally. We'll divvy it out later, like a turkey for these 6 kids and 3 adults, or I guess 5 kids, whatever it was. But I like the idea that when Achilles goes to visit his brother and everybody after the fact, you know, once he's retired. Also, why the fuck wouldn't he just? I guess he was just going to visit. He wasn't going to stay with them, I guess. I don't know. Because he just goes, maybe he just doesn't get to keep his government apartment after that. Who knows? Because he's a government employee. You know, he's a contracted government employee at that point, right? So I assume he takes his payout and gets the fuck out, you know? And then either he's destitute, or I guess he just has to buy some place somewhere. Who knows? But like whenever he goes there, it just looks like a normal fucking apartment for the most part. There's like slightly futuristic stuff, but everything else just looks like any apartment you'd see in the fucking 80s. It's like even they're wearing like sweaters. His brother's wearing like a dad sweater, like straight up. Like they're still making that shit.
Yeah, like, that's one of the things I kind of acknowledge about movies from that time. Well, even before that time, but it's like you're looking at his brother, you're looking at people. It was like people just looked like actors. They looked like they lived a hard life.
Yeah.
And given the theme of the movie, that is kind of the look you're going for. Anyways, like they had a hard life, because you look at his brother, it's like, yo, this dude has seen some shit.
Yeah, literally. And also the idea that there's kind of like the haves and the have-nots a little bit, you know. So you see like everything regarding the JOX is clean and pristine and white. And as soon as you get away from the compound, it's all filthy and disgusting. People's clothes are tattered, everything else like that. So, like, had we gotten more time with him out in the world, like, I feel like it would have built it out a little bit better. Like I said, we got like 25 more minutes of like him leaving, and then like other stuff like that, dealing with it, dealing with the psychological aspect. Like he very, very quickly deals with the psychological aspect of killing, like, you know, however many people it was. While he was trying to save their lives. That's the crazy part. So at the end of the battle, he's got Alexander beat, and the motherfucker fires off a hidden weapon. And at that point, projectile weapons were. I love the idea that like it has stages of the long range weapons and then the close quarter combat stuff. So like if you don't beat him with your missiles, you got to get close enough. You got to beat his ass, and if that doesn't work, then I don't know what. So it's actually like jousting in that way, where it's got set stuff that happens. Yeah. And even to the point that later, when they're on foot fighting, you know, there's like kind of like what happens when you get on when you're both knocked off your horse. You go to ground fight, you know. and then you start beating each other to death with pipes, like whatever's around. But he fires off a rocket fist, which is straight up an anime thing. And
Yes.
it doesn't go towards Achilles, it goes towards the crowd. So he tries to get in the way of it to stop it. And instead, we talk about our robots that keep falling down. Robots ain't humans, they fall down easy. And the shit gets knocked into the crowd, and he kills however many people were in there. And then at that point, they ban people from being there live, which why the fuck? Like, I mean, everybody has signed waivers to go, but this ain't a NASCAR race. This is combat. And they've got nothing to shield them. Like, they've got, like, sun shields, sort of. But, like, not... And I think at one point, like, a laser beam, like, it stops lasers. Because I think you see that at one point he deflects the laser and it, like, hits the roof and people are cheering. So I think we kind of nailed the good situation, I think. Let's see here. Oh, yeah, like we said, wearing the mask. The world building without having to tell you everything, I thought was interesting.
Yes.
And even to the point that food is scarce. The funny thing is, I don't think we ever saw the athletes eating. We just saw them training. I figured like it would end up being like the Hunger Games situation, almost like these big ridiculous meals. But no, it's like the funny thing is, this could be a series. Even now, they could turn this into a series if they wanted to. With today's money. Yeah.
I'd be interested in more.
Yeah, I think if they did this, but with the people who made The Expanse, I think it would be pretty good, in my opinion. Let's see, anything else here? Nope. All right, so what do you got for bad?
All right,
Big list.
My bad. It's actually not too bad.
Oh, I guess that's good then.
The dialogue is a little cheesy. But also keeping in mind the era that it was, coming from and when it was made. So I always try to like judge my good, bad, and ugly based off. I don't want to compare anything to today's standards because that is, although part of my ugly will be compared to today's standards to some degree.
Gotcha.
But like the dialogue was cheesy, but considering when it was, I mean, I think it still was cheesy for the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't look at it like award-winning fucking, writing. So it was solid though, all the same. And then it was a touch predictable, but I mean,
twist.
just given the time that it came out, it's like it's formulaic. Even though, like I said, I do like that it went in a different, kind of thematically. It's just touched on things that that plays to the social commentary. It still had a predictability to it where it's like, okay, we know what's coming. All right, he's off the team. He's going to come back. You see where this is all going. So it all kind of makes sense and plays together.
Yeah. So let's see the alternate cut where he doesn't come back and Athena just dies.
Love it.
Because I mean, there's no way she doesn't die. Like it's like. I'm sorry, Alexander's just going to wipe the fucking floor with her. I mean, he did anyways, but she was a complete noob, had no fucking clue what she was even getting into. She just, like... So, at that point of the movie, so Achilles has quit, and then Athena, going through the last couple of training things with the other tubies, she gets determined to be the one who goes on, because, of course, this obvious setup... you get the male rival who's clearly a doof who thinks he's better than everyone else, and also I think that guy just keeps playing those roles. Like I swear to God, if he's only the AC Slater looking dude, like I swear to God, every time he's in a movie, he's playing that same shitty role. But and also the shaking room, or the last little thing they did where they had to climb the fucking thing to get out, that trap room.
So that's part of my bad also because.
Really?
This was her, so when Athena, becomes the one, she's going to be the fighter. That's how it was determined. And it just felt like I don't know if that's the best course of action you want to take to determine who's going to be fighting this killer over there. Have them climb up, some monkey bars.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, they were pretty bad monkey bars. The one... Like they electrocuted you, burned you, oiled it down. It was basically a James Bond training session because all the James Bond gadgets. Like, but like the fact that the dude literally gets almost to the thing and the fucking final bar just falls out from under him.
Yes.
It's like, one, he should have seen that coming. Like,
Yeah.
two, like, as far as he didn't die, because we do see him in bandages later in the bar. So he didn't die.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Like with the arm cast.
Yeah.
Because I thought he was dead, and I was laughing my
that was
ass
that
off
was
and-
the implication, but no.
Yeah.
Sadly, that fucker didn't die. But yeah, you're right. I will agree that seems like a really weird and arbitrary way to. But I guess it's the determination and to get through the things. But also, you could just be lucky. You just wait for everybody else to fall the fuck off and go the ways they didn't go, right? You know. But it was also a time thing. So I mean, like, had it been like the hole was closing, you know, you had to get up there as fast as possible. But presumably, it was just gonna get worse. Like, you're already climbing a shaking structure that has all these other traps built into it. So it is a pain in the dick to get through this, or in the twat at this point. So, but yeah, no, I agree. That was kind of cheesy way to determine who's the best. It's like, also, we never see any of them training in any type of robot simulation, just like doing martial arts training. It's like, what part of needing to learn how to pilot the fucking robot, where does that come in? Where you just throw a trainee straight into a robot that they have no idea what they're doing against a killer, you know? That was a bad plan. With no duh, they've lost 9 fucking battles straight. So
maybe you need to go back to training now and figure out, okay, we've lost this many in a row.
yeah.
Maybe we need a new approach.
Well, we lost that many to Alexander. That's the thing. So we could assume that there are other battles, because Achilles won 9. So he won 9, but we never see those. And then the first one with Alexander was a draw, because Alexander cheated, but then Achilles lost. So it's kind of like, how do you split that? I do like their dialogue back and forth, like their bullshit, you know, talking back and forth, especially in the
Wish I
bar.
could say the
I
same.
love the one where he's like, you know, you're making my beer curdle, and then he's like, and you make my drink taste like blood. I was like, is he supposed to be Russian, or it was like, what country is he technically supposed to be from at this point? But like, to me, like, I've reveled in some of the cheesiness. There is bad dialogue, but like, I'm on board for the cheesy, but not the bad dialogue. Like I mentioned,
So yeah, the cheesy works though. But yeah, the dialogue in itself doesn't work, because again, cheesiness for what it is and when it is, it works for me. It's, you know, I don't hold any grudge. But the second that, you know, they start talking, it's like, okay, and it's not everyone. Alexander and Achilles, you know, they seem to have chemistry.
They're back and
to a
forth.
degree that works.
Yeah, their back and forth works.
But everyone else, it's like, not everyone, but there's a lot. And here's another thing too. I kept saying throughout the movie, because Athena, the actress who plays Athena, I don't know her name. I don't care what her name is, but I just have never liked her ever. Like, and I've only seen her in 2 things: this and then What's Happening Now.
Yeah,
and both of them, you know, I'm just like I could do without you. Like, and What's Happening Now, it's okay if you get hit by a car or, you know, you die off screen.
Yeah,
I don't care.
I agree. Like, I've only seen her in a handful of things too, like over time. And it's funny that she was in something as recent as That's So Raven. Like, I thought that was weird. I was looking at her IMDb. That's Anne-Marie Johnson. But like, it's just, I mean, the funny thing is like they definitely, everybody seems to be one dimensional, except for like Achilles. He's like the only person who has some other dimension to him. And it's only because he comes out with a conscience. Like, he's not just a heartless fighter. And of course, you see that when he tries to save the people. But like, he also could have been less people. The argument was, if he had done nothing, less people probably would have died. Assuming that rocket fist didn't explode. Because we see the one later when the second battle with yeah, that's the other part. I guess I could put that in my bads. So like, I have pretty limited bad. But mostly mine was pacing and editing, because
pacing.
Yeah, because the pacing was a little weird, because like some of the scenes make no sense how they get from one to the next. Like, it's like, once again, talking about like added, like there should have been a little bit more movie. So after he gets drunk as shit in the bar, and Athena takes him home, strips him down because she wants to see if his cock makes him special, apparently. And like, okay. Because apparently these Tubies are supposed to be like Vulcans or something. They're not normal people. They're just fucking weirdos who don't have any social cues or anything. But so he's hungover. I think there was an accident when he stands up and hits his head. Like he's covered up in the covers, like trying to hide himself. And then he's on the floor and then he stands up into the table. I don't know that was supposed to happen, but I laugh at it every time because drunk motherfucker or hungover motherfucker trying to do that. And then the idea he's trying to find some orange juice and he's like, oh, there's no orange juice. Of course not. He's like, literally like he's the kind of guy who doesn't take care of his own shit. So he knows there's no orange juice, but he desperately wants fucking orange juice. And then, and I love that they did the future thing of like everything's hidden in the wall. Like you get the slide away wall. Where the fuck does that wall go? Like that's going into another apartment. You're like, ah! Like the next door neighbors retreating from your walls.
One thing that stood out to me when it came to like the future tech and the doors. It was like, it's weird how like, in the 80s and 90s, we thought the future were going to have doors that made noises like that.
Yeah, always. Sliding doors. It's like, Star Trek doors.
Yeah. The swishing sound is like, okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, so what I was getting at was, it goes from this scene where he's fighting with Athena because, or at least arguing with Athena, because she wanted to see what was special about it, and he said, no, look, luck is part of it and all this other shit. And she's like, there's nothing special about you, blah, 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 and then she leaves. And then the next scene, he's watching them train and has like a sentimental moment where he realizes he's being an asshole and like leaves his little scarf or whatever the fuck, ascot, whatever the hell that thing was from his training team on her locker. And then they have a nice moment and then she gets naked and we see her butt. But like, it's like those two scenes don't go together. Like there's needs to be like a couple hours worth of shit happening between those two scenes. It's like that didn't make sense. And then the return, like I'm leaving, I'm done. And then literally a day and a half later, seemingly, he comes right back and they're like, yay, we don't have to fucking put her in the machine. And then nobody goes, maybe we should watch what she does, because she's clearly fucking unhinged. Because at no point did he go, hey, by the way, your crazy fucking Tubi took me home and raped me and then fucking did all this crazy shit. And no point, and like, maybe y'all should keep an eye on the fucking Tubies. You know, like, no, the Tubies are fine. It's like, no, they're all sociopaths. It's like, you fucking made fucking sociopaths to go hop in these robots, and they don't even know how to fucking deal with anything. But yeah, it was just like, that was my biggest thing in there. But the idea also that he came back after, like, and maybe it's in his moral compass or whatever, but he just, instead of wanting to come back and like save her, which he kind of does, he wants to white knight her. Like, I'm gonna fucking keep you from fighting because I don't want anything bad to happen to you. It's like, you guys literally have had 2 conversations prior to this, and one of them you were drunk as fuck. It's like, but he's so like, I can't. If it had been the other dickhead, I guarantee you he wouldn't have come back. But because it's her, he has to come back and white knight.
Well, I think that's, you know, one of the, again, other parts.
I guess it's a trope.
Like the pace and just it's almost like things I see in current movies too, where there's like relationships that aren't earned.
Yeah,
it's just, it happens so fast. It's like, okay, well, wait a minute, you just plop that in our lap.
Yeah.
We need more build to that.
Yeah, I feel like maybe at some point there was more movie and it just got trimmed for time or whatever. It's like, because it just feels like with the editing, like they made it the best it could be, but like there's a weird pacing like right in the middle. It's just like we just speed through all the important moments and then get back to the battles, which is a modern day idea, not a 90s deal, I would think. But like I think that's one of my major issues. But I guess, you know, you have a point with the dialogue as well. Like some of that dialogue is bad, like, but other parts, like, I'm a fan of, but there are certain bits that are just like, ugh, like dreadful. It's like, but then I'm on board for the camp, you know. And I feel bad for Matsumoto. Yeah. He didn't deserve that shit. But also, I'm offended by the traitor being from Texas. I took some personal fucking offense to that.
I knew that was coming.
Yeah. Of course, the guy in the black cowboy hat is the bad guy. Huh. Go fucking figure.
Damn Tubies.
But I like it. I did like how they, you know, determined that. We never see it happen technically. He tries, but he's so desperate at the end there, and he's like, well, you should just tell me, just I mean, that's of course his bad guy moment. But I love that his resolve was like, y'all ain't taking me to jail, fuck off, and he just fucking kills himself. And I was like, I mean, props. He's like, no, fuck y'all, I'm just jumping off this fucking railing.
I'll see you in
Fuck it.
Like, you won't take me alive.
Yeah, I literally was. You won't take me alive. But in another type of movie, he would have jumped in the robot, and then it would have been like a 2-on-1 situation. The traitor switches sides in the middle of the battle, and then now you got to fight the other bad guy plus a guy you didn't know was bad, and then you're on one leg. That's the kind of shit that would normally happen. But we didn't get that. We just got, well, he's fucked. But and you know what's really funny? This is something I didn't catch in here, and maybe it's a good thing technically. I put it in the good. So we see early in the movie when after the first battle, before the first battle, Matsumoto is doing origami. He makes a little origami crane, and I didn't realize throughout the movie he's making little origami, and that's how he marks things in the cab of the robot or in the cockpit. So he had the sun thing, he had the red or the green little blinky thing, and because Achilles can't read, he's totally uneducated, so he's got to give him symbols to know what anything is, or you have to watch diagrams for how anything works. So it's like, what does this button do? It's like, instead of a big ass readout, it's the bright one. That's why it has the sun origami. I didn't realize that those were origami. I just thought they were little things. It never occurred to me in all the times I've watched this movie throughout my life that that's what he did. He did that on purpose. So it's like that little bit of him, even in that little bit of set design. Also, I would say I missed that too. In the design of everything, everything looked mostly purposeful. Not too busy, but enough techno stuff that you go, okay, you're in this thing. It looks like a cockpit of something. You got all the switches you're gonna flip, all this kind of nonsense. It sort of made sense. They came up with ideas like that. Like I said, we said early on, it's just like nobody else was fucking thinking of that shit then. It's like, how do we get it to where they simulates the walking? Well, we'll just have the ability to walk in place. It makes no sense that a machine would walk at the same pace as a human, because big fuck off steps, But, this is supposed to be the bad section, Shoki. The bad section. Stop talking about the good that you forgot earlier. All right. Okay, so from there, let's go into the uglies then, because I'm interested in your ugly.
All right. So, again, not a lot of ugly for me, but it's a big ugly for me. And it's the fight choreography.
Okay, I get that.
Just fighting in general. But this is always my thing in any movie with fighting.
Mm-hmm.
It just always looks really, really bad, and it makes no sense. Even when he sees his niece, he puts up his Duke's play fighting.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh my fucking god, dude! That my 7-year-old would kill you.
Yeah.
Well, no, he probably hit harder, but my 7-year-old knows how to check a kick. She knows how to, get out the way of punches, and knows how to shoot for the takedown.
Yeah.
It's like, but that's my only real ugly is just the fight choreography, and then even translating that to the robots as well. It is a task, but I don't hold that part against the film because of transitioning that for the robots. But when the humans are actually fighting, it's just like, holy shit, dude.
Yeah, because even when he's training with the tubies, it's him versus all the tubies. Even though they don't go 100% one-on-one, all these group battles are always one-on-one slow battles. Yeah. Most of the moves that he does are so simple. These are supposed to be top of the line fighters, and only with a few kicks and some other things are the flashiest moves they pulled out. But also it makes sense because they do have to be trained. Their movements have to make sense for a robot. Sure. You wouldn't necessarily do a takedown. You wouldn't necessarily do a spear. You wouldn't spear the other robot because now your cockpit is facing into the ground. It's not like you got head up, So
not so much even just for takedowns. I'm just saying in general, the punches.
No, I got you.
Looked really, really bad.
Yeah, no, I still get that. Oh, I didn't realize I got a message from. Okay, I was like, what? Got a notification that this person's still waiting for a reply. I was like, I didn't know I got a message from them. But no, yeah, I get what you're saying, but like I think, and I agree that it is silly and not great choreography, but I also think that it is a weird situation where some of your movement is translated in the actual fight, some of it, but the rest of it is like buttons you push. So like the idea of knowing how to fight, in a way, but I think they're mostly relying on weapons versus close combat. Even though they do close combat, we see how well that works. It's usually like, overhead pounding or like a quick gut check or one ridiculous leg swing, which, of course that got blocked. Why wouldn't it?
Super telegraphed.
I mean, like, and these things are gigantic and slow, so it's no way you can't not see it coming. So your other option is you do this big leg swing and then hope you have a close combat weapon to attack with, while they're distracted checking your leg, right? Which we sort of see. And by the way, I think one of the funniest weapons in this was the crotch saw. Like that's the ultimate teabag move. It really was. He's on the ground, face up, and he's literally teabagging with a fucking chainsaw. I'm like, bro, like they didn't even know that was there. Also, why? And also a quadrupedal, like a centaur type robot, actually makes way more sense, even given how slow it is. Oh, I'll throw one thing in the bad that I forgot about until just now: the pointless trip to space. There was no reason to fly up to space. Also, how did they come right back down to where they were? Achilles was crashing. It was like he just happened to land exactly back on the battlefield. I mean, sure. Yeah, because rotation of the Earth and however long it takes to get into orbit and then come back down. Like, I get rule of cool, but sometimes it's too dumb. Like, rule of cool can be pushed too far. It's like, I like the idea that they took off because I already saw them do a little aerial move because Alexander flew up into the battle, which, by the way, when that thing, like that first four-legged thing fucking showed up, it was intimidating. It's like, fuck. Like, even at that point, you're like, okie dokie. And then, like, the transformation later to the tank battle almost was funny. It's like, you can't hit him? He's literally a giant fucking tank moving around in a very slow serpentine maneuver. It's like, how bad is your fucking aim? And then I realized, oh, this makes sense. He's literally trying to aim a giant fucking arm with his hand. Like, fucking shoot over there. God damn it. But of course, nowadays it'd be a different story because video games exist. Back then, it's 1988. Yeah. They don't have fucking video games remotely like that. Like, some of the early shooters, but nothing to that degree where they would know how to use a fucking weapon to that way,
I will say also with my ugly being the fight choreography. Now that is, like I said, I try not to hold things to today's standards. That's the only thing that I hold to today's standards, considering the time again, and looking at the action movies that we had with the fight choreography that existed at the time. It was somewhat on par, a little under, but still, like I'm holding that to today's standards just because I train. So it's like when I see it in any film, it does not matter what film it is. I always have to point it out. But other than that, that's my only ugly. And quite honestly, I feel like that's not even really. That's just kind of a nitpick.
That is a nitpick really. For you specific. My ugly actually is an ugly, which is it's literally an ugly situation. So the miniatures and the stop motion stuff looks fantastic, but when they get to the one-to-one stuff, they failed. You can tell they shot one thing before they had the other thing. So like, and I noticed this because I've seen the movie 20 fucking times. So at the first battle, whenever he's walking around by the feet, that's not what the feet of the final robot look like. Like, very different design. Like, similar. Also, the size is inconsistent from the ones with humans next to it versus the ones that actually go into battle. And, like, you can tell that they did their best to make the cockpit area look like it was supposed to. But if you compare the shot, like, when they're standing on the gantry and he's getting in, to the actual robot in the miniatures, they don't look alike. It's just like... Okay, because there's like two big fucking cannons like right next to him, and then I don't think those are there in the actual robot, and then the size doesn't make sense. So as the gantry's going up, right, and he gets right near the top, there's like 3 technicians or whatever standing on a little platform, and like you see it right next to it, and they're like however tall next to the robot, and then it does a zoomed out shot for the miniature, and they're microscopic compared to the same fucking part of the robot. So like the inconsistencies, like I guess they can only build something so big, but then okay, scale it differently to the miniature. Like just make a dude slightly bigger in the miniature. You know, that was my only big thing. And it's like, that's literally an ugly for me. It's just like, because it always bothered me as a kid. I was like, that's not what it looks like. And then they finally get up there. And that was the red and white, not the white and white robot. But I like the idea they could just slap together a new robot, like, in time. But I also love the idea in this. They mentioned it because they tell the model of the robot before the battle begins. And so, like, the one that Achilles is in is, like, number 8 or something, and like the one that Alexander's in is like number 37. It's like, damn, it's like they've got way more iterations of that robot than the other ones. Like, are they doing that many mods? Because it's not even the same robot when he comes back in the second battle. Like, it's similar in the upper torso, but like it's so different looking. But I like the mech designs and shit. But like, I think that the ugly thing is that's the ugly part of it for me. Also, the idea that Achilles, who can't even fucking read, can wire up and fire that fucking fist while just looking at a random panel inside the robot arm. He's sitting there like, okay, if I tweak this light comes on to indicate what I'm doing, as if I know that if all of these things light up, the thing shoots. It's like, I'm just gonna hot wire this fucking rocket arm, which, fun scene, but totally fucking ridiculous, you know? Yeah, but I did, and one thing that I absolutely love about this, I didn't throw it in here, but it's because we're talking about it. So Achilles does come in to rescue Athena after she's got her ass beat, right? So she's on the ground, she's unconscious. He pulls up in his car, which I'm glad that the battlefield is so fucking open you can just drive onto it, right? There's no fences to keep people out or anything. But I guess they're like, he shows his day pass. I don't know how the fuck he gets in there. You know, it's Disney World. He's, you know, whatever. I'm gonna go get in a robot, and then he literally, without any help, unsuits her, suits up, gets in the robot. But for me, it was the cheesiness of the line. I'm gonna get in this thing, and I'm gonna kick your ass. And then he laughs back. I was like, I'm glad that we do anime rules where the enemy literally lets you do the thing you want to do instead of just killing you while you're fucking waiting. It's like, I'm gonna have patience to get the fight I want, right? You know, I mean, I still love it because that's like, to me, that's the action movie thing. You got to have the one-liners, you know.
Well, yeah,
and so that's why I was on board for that. And then the intimidation factor, and then also for me, the end of the movie, as cheesy as that fight was, like, Alexander's fucked up, but Achilles is smart enough to notice that, okay, his arm is fucked. If I go for the arm, you know, that's his weakness right now, you know. But then the end thing, I actually had the final scene, the crash and burn, you know, the we can live, we can both live, you know, that idea of the ending on peaceful, the two warriors come together in peace instead of just killing each other, you know, the weird respect they show, and then they do the crash and burn fist. I actually had that as my phone background for like 5 years. Like, I was that big of a nerd. It's like, because nobody else would know what the fuck it was. And I love the RCA cables plugged in on the back of the fucking hand. You know, the old school, the red, yellow, white RCA cables. Like, yeah, it's like they did a good job building the props, in my opinion. Most of the props. I think some of them were bad, but like, that was just fun. Like, the soundtrack
you
too.
know, considering for the time though, again, it works. Like, if you're watching just cinema through the years and haven't seen anything today, you're just watching it in order, like, that works though. It's like, okay, this is fine for its time.
It's 100% of its time. Yeah. And those suits, like, even though they only had like maybe 2-3 of those actual fighting suits, like, that shit, they put a lot of stuff on that. Like, they loaded that thing down to make it look like it was covered in sensors and shit that you would need to be able to, like, command a walking robot, you know? You know, even had the fucking air tube and stuff just in case you had to fly to fucking space, because, you know, that's the thing you can do. And also, I will say, Athena used the fucking blinders wrong. She was literally told to turn the screen opacity all the way up so she wouldn't be blinded, and she didn't do that shit. So she should have technically been blinded. You know, and also the fact that Alexander just, like, is just annoyed slightly by the flash in his eyes. It's like, but the spy thriller aspect of it, like the stealing fucking shit back and forth, it's like this new awesome weapon we created. It's a flash. It's a fucking flare. It's to give you roughly 2.5 seconds to do something. But if you're too dumb to do something while you have that advantage, well, you're fucked anyways. Meanwhile, change the color of the laser. It's like green laser. That's the good one. We're gonna use the green laser.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like,
Of course.
it's the more potent laser. Which I guess if they hadn't had their shit stolen, it probably would have been more effective. But I mean, like the fact that a bolo saw worked. You know, fucking saw off a fucking arm. It's like, why would you just stand there and allow that to happen? It's like, all right. So, final score. What you gonna give it?
So I found the movie actually really enjoyable. You know, even so, like I said, whenever I watch older films, I try to put myself in its time and imagine, you know, I'm watching this in 1990, you know, as a kid. So putting it in that perspective, it was actually very enjoyable. Bad and ugly, you know, out the window. I give this a 7.2.
Nice.
So this is something I know, like, it's not something that I would say, you know, hey, you got to go watch this, but it's something I know if I'm sitting around, I'm flipping through and I see it, I'm definitely going to watch it.
It's a Sunday afternoon special, which, you know.
Actually, no, it might be a Tuesday night special for me. You know,
Tuesday.
It's like one of those things. If I'm flipping through and I need something on, like the kind of idle noise, you know, I'll put that on, like when I'm doing notes and stuff. It's like, okay, because I could look up, like, okay, I'm enjoying this. Versus, you know, their films that Killer Kites.
No, that doesn't ever need to be on. No, that should not be on.
Sharknado, as much as I have fun doing those movies, Sharknado does not get that playback.
Yeah, Sharknado would have to be on and muted. Like, I'm just not even. I don't want any actual attention drawn to it, but I need some movement happening in the background. I just don't need sound.
Yeah.
So considering you rated it higher than I expected, I'll actually bump my score a little bit because I'm bringing it down realistically because it is one of my favorite movies, but I have to acknowledge the actual bad parts of the movie making aspect of it. So I'll probably bring it up to, because I had it at a 7, but you rated it higher than that, so I got to actually bring it up. So I'll probably bump it to a 7.5. I would say, because I should be higher than you because I love this movie and I know it inside and out. I didn't even rewatch it to do the review here tonight. Nice. I was like, I know this movie. I used to be able to quote almost the entire movie. I think I've seen it probably like definitely more than Star Wars. Like, I've definitely seen it more than any Star Wars movie. Probably on par with Jurassic Park. Probably close to that. Because I had it on VHS and I loved it. So I watched it all the fucking time. Especially once I had my own VCR. Dude, I'd watch this shit once a month as a kid. And put yourself in like 12-year-old Dante mind and like really consider watching it at that point. It probably would have it would have hit different, you know?
Yes.
You know, 40-something Dante, you know, obviously it's going to hit significantly different. This is a hard movie to watch at 40. I mean, it's a fun movie to watch at 40. It's not like bad, but like start at 12 and it changes your life, you know?
And the thing is too, it's like when I look at if I'm watching this and I don't have any knowledge of how to fight, like trained fighting or anything, like I'm like, holy shit, this is fucking cinema gold.
Yeah. So imagine if we did get Jean-Claude Van Damme. Clearly the fight choreography would have gone up, but then you also probably would have got a robot doing the fucking, you know, ridiculous splits at some point to get a
spin kick.
It'd have done a split spin kick or a split nut punch probably long before Mortal Kombat did it. You know, he would have definitely done that move. Imagine the chainsaw crotch coming down and he just does the split kick and punches the fucking saw out of the way. Or better yet, the saw goes into the arm and then he just snaps it off. Like, okay, I'm making this movie better by fucking proxy here.
I was thinking he probably just like clasped and like.
No, because then it looks like he's fucking doing bukkake on himself, like robot bukkake. No, if he like takes the hit, like imagine a chainsaw going into the arm and then he just snaps that fucker off. like basically breaking the dick off. But no, if he grabs it with both hands, and like, no, I don't think that's the method, because it would just saw the fucking arms out, or the hands out. But no, it would have definitely been a fun movie in a different direction. But I think like having a much cheesier actor in the main role instead of like, because Jean-Claude's still very serious. Like I've seen enough of his movies of that era. Like, it's still pretty serious. The movie's cheesy around him, but he's generally a serious character. Also, could you imagine his like 80s mullet at that point? Like, it would have probably changed the film a little bit. I don't think flat top. I don't think it would have been a flat top. I think it'd have been mullet.
No, yeah, I don't think it was at flat top just yet.
Now, if he was Alexander instead of Achilles,
yes.
That would have been a very different movie.
I could like that a lot. I think one thing to note too, just with my score, I was kind of flipping between 6.8 and 7.2.
Okay.
So it is weird because it's
a
like
7 average of your score.
Yes.
Yeah. So
I was like it's better than a 6.8 because like I enjoyed it more. Like, and I think about how I rate my beers.
Yeah.
It's like a 6.8. It's like I don't hate it.
I mean, a 6.8 is to me is a decent score, because like what the things that are going to be way up in the 9s, which are going to be pretty rare, but they're going to be very special things. But it's not like just run of the mill. It's 5. It's just like some movie. Like everything below a 5 is shit and just gets shittier. Yes. But a 5 is just run of the mill, some movie, something is happening on a screen. So if it's a 6.8, that's, or even a 7.2, like that's a pretty fucking decent crap movie, you know, for the time, I should say, like in the moment. And it for me, it's sad that this movie didn't technically have its day. You know, it's like had its decade later, you know, but it should have been genre defining, and instead it just disappeared. Like, that's the funny part. Like, it should have been the beginning of like this big mecha type thing, and instead it just fucking fell to the wayside because it fucking came out in November for no goddamn reason. Also, maybe people were tired of the Cold War shit by then, but I mean, like in 1990 for the release date, nobody probably cared that much about the Cold War stuff, but and maybe it was off. When did Rocky 4 come out?
Oh, I want to say Rocky 4. I want to say 87.
I was thinking 87. So if this thing is basically the robot equivalent of Rocky 4, then people already saw that movie and probably went, "Oh, it's just an American fighting a Russian." Whoop-de-fucking-do. We've seen this. It's like, big robots? That's stupid. Because like, I could see this movie getting made now because of the big robot craze of the 80s and the 90s. But like,
Rocky 4 was 85.
Okay, yeah, so we already had 5 years. Well, I mean, if it was getting made in 88, so 3 years after Rocky 4, you know. So, and all the Rocky movies realistically. So like, if this had become a whole series and this was the tail end of Achilles run, different thing. Like, if it had been set up for fucking sequels, like, obviously we wanted that, but if this was the tail end of it, it would have been a different story. So we get all this shit that happens before this movie that we don't get anything of. It's like, and then we just get the tail end of this character's story, realistically. It's a weird place to be for a fun, dumb movie. But as a fan of the big robot genre, like, this is clearly, like, I loved fucking Transformers. I hadn't got into Gundam or anything else like that by this point in the 90s. So, like, this was my jam. You know, I could probably dedicate, there's probably so much of what happens, or the things I own in this room, that are dedicated to the existence of this movie, you know? So it was genre defining for me, realistically. And so, like, in the fact that it gets a resurgence due to a similar modern take with Pacific Rim. And so, like, you know, young people get to see this movie because they get interested in giant robots fighting. You know, I mean, I don't know if it would have been good of them fighting robots, because then it would have been aliens. It would have been Pacific Rim for the sequel. So that would have been interesting. Pacific Rim 20 years early with stop motion and miniatures. That would have been weird, you know. You know, because at some point you're gonna have to have guys in suits for the aliens. So I don't know how that would have gone if they had gone sequel. So I mean, I think it's good that it was by itself. I just kind of, at this point in time, I would love a redo. And also, good luck ever finding a representation of those fucking robots. There was one model kit ever of his red and white robot, and I don't think they ever made anything else. So it's kind of fucked up. And I'm sure those miniatures might still exist somewhere in some crazy person's garage, probably the originals. Like, that would be a fun thing to have. Though I do have a question. How did Sarah take this movie?
So, I think around the second half, she started to really actually dial in and care. So what happens is when we watch movies, a lot of times if I'm and I mentioned this on the episode with my teammate who wrote the book. When I'm watching anything for the podcast, it feels like homework. In which case, I can't enjoy it as much because I feel like it's work. Whereas, like, you know, and that was the example with the book, and even with this a little bit. And some of the movies that I have to research that is a rewatch or a new watch. With this one, it was a little similar to that because I went into it kind of like, oh man, I gotta watch this and try to like focus. But the thing is, if I'm watching this just on my own, then I'm absorbing it better. So where Sarah picks up the slack in that is she can see when like I'm starting to like kind of feel like, okay, this is a chore. So then she picks up on it and then she starts calling out things. So I feel like once she got to the second half of the movie, she started to, I wouldn't say really enjoy it, but she was more interactive and discussing things from the movie versus the first half. She was just kind of like, I'm just here because you're here.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's because this is definitely a quote unquote boys movie.
Oh, for
like,
sure.
So if any female can manage to get attached and interested to any degree, it's already a win. To you know, and it's not even a deep story about anything. You know, it's like it's super on the surface. Like there's only like the tiny bit of morality stuff thrown in there, and the idea of being essentially a mercenary for hire for your country. And that's the only business, like the best business is killing for your country in this future. Like that's the only real kind of thing. And like the idea that an uneducated dude is one of the best warriors on the planet who's clearly not that good at fighting. So how shitty are the enemies if he's this bad at fighting? And then of course we see we have no future because the Tubies all fucking suck. So, or at least against Alexander, they suck. I mean, maybe they've got a fucking Achilles out there somewhere instead. Or another fucking Tex, because you know we only hear about Tex's heyday. So yeah, but like this is why like I'm more interested in like I want to build out this world and see more of it, just because the rest of the world is so shallow that I want to see the depth. You know.
Yes,
it's like I'd like.
There's a lot of room for that growth.
There's so much growth that could happen with this universe, but we never get any of it. You know, it's even the backstory. Like I said, I had to read the description to know that there was a whole nuclear war. Like, that's why the world is the way it is. We talk about the wars and they just stopped doing war. They didn't say, oh, by the way, we nuked half the planet. So that's why it's nearly unlivable. Not just, wars became too costly. Let's just build giant robots, you know, because that's the budget we've got now, you know. It's like, it's
kind of.
I mean, we are doing it. That's the funny part. Is like they're doing it for fun. They have multi-country big robot battles, and it just keeps getting crazier and crazier. Because in Japan, they made several of them, and even one that's definitely Gundam designed that barely moves, but it's interesting that they made it. Of course, it doesn't shoot real bullets; it shoots Nerf things, but you know, it's still gigantic, and you have to pilot it like that, which is nuts. You know. But and you're closed in your cockpit and you gotta go by screens and shit instead of a window. Could you imagine this shit? Basically like sitting in your car and trying to fight someone else who's in another car. Like, and you can only see so much out the fucking window. It's like you gotta have people tell you shit's happening. Oh, look over there. Oh, what? Oh, fuck. And you gotta react in time. You know.
Well, it's like, yeah, having blinders on.
Yep.
It's like
Yeah.
all you have is like that straightforward.
Which is why this is just
You know,
comes to like just literally they're just kind of bumping dicks by the end. It's like you pull out your crotch saw.
Yeah.
Let's see. I just want to know how many all have a secret crotch saw and you just never got a chance to use it until that point. It's like
dude, that's the go-to weapon.
I mean, really, like your ultimate. Once you have that, your ultimate goal is to get them on the ground and use the crotch saw. Like I said, it's the ultimate teabag. It's just like I don't need to shoot at this point because technically this is a close quarter weapon. It's like I'm gonna knock their asses down in one way or another. I'm using the crotch saw. It's like stop.
That's got to be super disheartening. Like once you're down and somebody just does that, it's like you just accepted defeat. They're like, like
it's a teabag. I mean, what do you do? There's no respawn.
Yeah.
And the fact that he went directly at the cockpit too. Oh, I didn't even consider that. He literally took the fucking crotch saw to the cockpit. Oh my god, he literally dicked him to death. So yes. So thanks to Dante for coming over here and putting up with me again. It's always fun talking with you, my friend.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, and of course, go follow all of his podcasts, except for Columpton, because you probably won't get into that one. I enjoy Columpton. Oh, by the way, before we leave, I need to get whichever address to send the box to, because I'm going to box that shit up very soon.
Okay,
All the beers I got for you guys, and I do want to pick up a couple more this weekend, and then I will send that shit to y'all. So I definitely need to get an address via message or whatever. So because I need to send y'all some Texas beers. The good Texas beers, because you guys keep trying Shiner and that kind of shit. I'm like, no. I'm gonna send you some real Texas beers, and hopefully you'll give it an okay score. I'm getting phlegmy at the end of this. Fuck. So either way, all right, yeah. I like how I said we're done, and then we went for 20 more minutes. That's what it is. All right,
hey, start up another one.
We'll
all right,
see
man.
you guys next time. I got to do a quick outro here. See you guys next time. Subscribe to the Dante stuff. And I don't even know how to end this because it's a Shoky thing, not a Naimiya thing. So I guess I'll go with keep on nerding, I guess. That's the old Shoky saying, keep on nerding.
Nerds.
Exactly. Actually, it was keep on building, keep on nerding, and then have a good day or whatever it used to be. I don't know. I haven't done that in forever.